How do you see warehouse automation evolving?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time in the space. Outrider, we provide yard automation via subscription software model. We automate yard trucks that are used to move trailers around the outside of distribution facilities. And so we really live at this intersection of autonomous driving and warehouse automation. The yard is the connection point really between the two. When we look at the over the road space, I think it's been an interesting time, kind of a shakeout happening in that part of the industry. Some really interesting players there. When it comes to warehouse automation, it's on fire. There's over 100 billion that's been invested in warehouse automation. And I think when it comes to automating sort of the central core of the warehouse, I can't say that that's mature yet, but it's very much getting there. There are a lot of solutions on the market, things that have really been scaled up. I think that one of the really interesting spaces right now is around automation around the dock doors, both inside and outside. And so inside, what I've seen a lot of startups who are doing work now on trying to automate the loading and unloading of trailers to increase the speed and efficiency of that task. I think that'll be an interesting space to watch. Obviously, there's also a lot of buzz right now about humanoid robots, as well as artificial intelligence and generative AI. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see what evolves in that space. There are people out there working on products that would eliminate the need for specialized robots and instead have some, multi-purpose or general purpose robots operating in these environments. Outside of the dock doors, that's where we come in, automating the flow of trailers around the yard and really making that outdoor space as efficient as we've seen has been happening with the indoor spaces.
You have a background, I'm going to call it niche robotics, from iRobot to the Amazon Scout program. Both are operating in a niche, and what the trend that I'm seeing in warehouse automation, a lot of startups are tackling one little niche. They're not trying to automate the whole warehouse. Do you see that innovation continuing around niches in the warehouse automation space?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think the recent advances in artificial intelligence, as well as the humanoid aspect that I just mentioned, I think that's put an interesting question of will we see more general applications come out. I'm still a believer in what I think is maybe the more traditional logic in the robotic space, which is find a problem that you can solve really well for customers and give them value. Get really good at that. It's a lot easier to make a robot that solves enough of a problem for customers than to try to create a perfect robot. And so I do think that as we look at ongoing automation in the space, you'll continue to see startups that are, from an efficiency and a focus point of view, identifying these niche areas, coming up with solutions that solve them for customers, and then bringing them to market and scaling them up. I think there's another, an interesting learning that I got early in my career. This is really kudos to my time at iRobot, is that if you can solve a problem, 90% of a problem, let's say, you can do 90% of the work, but, there might be a long tail of harder things that are, adjacent to that problem. If you can give that long tail to a human to do and really let humans do what they do best, which is problem solve and be flexible and really deal with complex and interesting situations. But meanwhile, you create the robot that takes the base load of work. I think that's also a recipe for success in robotics, where again, you don't have to make the perfect robot, but you can make the robot that delivers value back to customers and can be finished and scaled immediately.
Is the value that's being delivered from automation efficiency?
Yeah, I think there's a range of things that you get from automation. And of course, it'll vary on the project. Efficiency is one big driver, right? I think CFOs and COOs very focused on cost containment. Also, in many cases, struggling with hiring for some of these roles. And so having roles go unfilled, which impacts the efficiency of the operations. But there's other considerations too, right? Safety is a big one, right? Getting humans out of the loop, I think almost inherently makes it safer. This is true in the space that we're in. With yard trucks, you've got drivers getting in and out of cabs. They're working around other trucks. And unfortunately, in the traditional space, accidents happen. If you get humans out of that loop, they're not exposed to those risks anymore. I think one of the other big ones, and for me, it's sort of the learning from the first half of this decade, is just the importance of resiliency. We had this massive disruption from COVID and then the bullwhip effect and these fluctuations in the supply chain. And I think automation, it may not fully solve that, but it certainly helps to increase resiliency. I think back again, at my time at iRobot, I was running the e-commerce business during COVID, and we had product piling up at the loading dock and then also piling up in loaded trailers on the yard. And if those two parts of the process had been automated, they wouldn't have piled up. They're piling up because there wasn't staff. But if those processes were automated, that part of the supply chain would have kept flowing and kept the economy moving.
Automation provides, as you said, resiliency. It keeps the supply chain moving. And at some point, the entire supply chain is going to be automated and it's going to become flexible. As Outrider develops your autonomous yard trucks, what type of increased throughput are you seeing, or do you feel that you'll be able to do when companies start to implement your yard solution?
Yeah. Our first target is to match human throughput. I think that's really where customers see value from our system. We offer a subscription-based service to our autonomous driving system. That offers a cost savings against typical labor bills. And so when we're at the productivity of humans, they're already seeing, net efficiencies. But one of the benefits that we have is our system can just keep running. Of course, the trucks have to go back into charge occasionally, but they're able to operate around the clock. And so one of the things that we're offering customers is the ability, maybe when warehouse operations have slowed down, to keep those trucks running, cleaning up the yard, pre-positioning trailers, and really setting it up to be as efficient as possible when the warehouse gets busy again in the future. And then, of course, as we continue to evolve the system, speed it up, that's where throughputs and efficiencies go even higher. I think one of the other opportunities that we have is because we have this window into the moves on the yard, for customers who are interested, we have the ability to optimize the flow of trailers around the yard and the sequencing of moves to really try to squeeze efficiency out of those trailer moves.
When do we get to a point with warehouse automation where there's a air traffic control or robotics traffic control that coordinates all aspects of the automation? If you know there's a load coming in to A and you have to move to B, that your system is already there pre-positioned, as well as having the robots on the inside. When do we get there?
Soon. I think actually, one of the hurdles to automation is that exchange of information, bits of information being locked up in different systems. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to stitch that information together so then you can start operating as a cohesive system. The use case that you gave an example of, it's something that would be fairly straightforward to do, connecting transportation management systems, yard management systems, and our Outrider system so that, we're ready and waiting when a trailer comes in to pull it to the door. So I think that's a reality that can come to pass very soon.
When you look at, say, a 100-bay facility or larger, how do you determine how many Outrider vehicles are going to create the most value for your customers there?
Yeah. Well, we always start the customer conversations with, an understanding of the workflows on the yard, understanding how the trailers flow around. It is typical that a trailer will be moved 4 or 5 times from when it comes onto the yard before it moves back out. Our industrial engineering group will take a look at historical move data, and we get a really good sense of what the pattern and historical trends of trailer moves on the yard are. One of the other things that's a factor here is, we've designed our system to be the majority of the trucks on the yard. But we always plan to keep at least one human-driven truck on the yard. And that goes back to what I was saying before of doing most of the job, doing that base load to give value to the customer, but leaving the long tail to the very capable humans who can handle that greater complexity. That allows us to make a simpler system faster. And so once we have that historical move data, then we can estimate how many trucks are necessary to automate those moves, meet the base load, as well as meet additional capacity needs. Then it's really a conversation with the customer. Our system's designed to be deployable in a unit of one, a single AV, or multiples. And you can deploy one and then scale it up to multiples. So it also really depends on the customer appetite. Do they want to dip their toe with a single vehicle, or do they want to jump in more fully and automate more of the moves out of the gate?
With the logistics industry becoming highly automated, how do you position Outrider to stand out in that market where customers are coming to you and saying, we really need this solution because we can increase our efficiency by X?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, there's been a lot of investment in warehouse automation. To date, there has been no innovation investment in the yard. Outrider was the first mover here in terms of yard automation. And we've developed a system that is really a holistic, easy to implement solution for customers to automate their yard. So frankly, it's not hard to stand out. We've got incredible patent portfolio. We've had systems deployed with a number of customers, customers that represent like 20% of the yard trucks in North America, and really, a lot of the big names in this space. And so we're differentiated both by just being the first ones there, but then by a number of the innovations that we've had over the last couple of years. So a couple of things that we're really proud of that I like to highlight. One is our Trailer Connect system that connects airlines to the trailer to release the brakes, allowing you to pull the trailer. You can't move a trailer unless you do that. We've created an autonomous system that does that, connects to the trailers without requiring any modification on the trailer side. So all of the equipment is on the tractor side. That's important because there's just a huge diversity of trailers in the United States, 6 million trailers actually, and we didn't want to have to retrofit all of them. And then another area that we're really proud of is the autonomous driving capabilities, our advanced perception stack based on a multi-sensor hardware kit that really enables our autonomous driving around the yard and moving with this articulated vehicle. We're able to back to dock doors with centimeter accuracy. And I think most people, when they see it the first time, it's one of those wow moments. It certainly was for me to see the autonomous system just gently place that trailer precisely onto the dock door. So there are a number of ways that, we really think we stand out in this space, and we're excited to continue scaling up with our customers.
Before Andrew founded the company, why, in your opinion, was there not a focus on yard automations? Now it seems obvious, and you can look at the capital you've raised, you look at your very public investors. It's validated Andrew's vision. Why was there no focus on it until Andrew founded Outrider?
It's a great question. I suppose with any innovative idea, there's always that spark, that moment. And, kudos to Andrew for really seeing that back in those years. And, one of the amazing things now is that when we talk to prospects, there's very little doubt. It's just sort of assumed that the yard will be automated. But I know when Andrew started, that wasn't the case. If I think back to the mid-teens, late teens there, I think there was a lot of focus and a lot of excitement about over-the-road driving. And so I think a lot of attention went there. A lot of folks with the necessary skill sets to solve this problem were focused on solving that over-the-road driving problem, and is spread across robo taxis and trucks and other use cases. And I really think what happened was Andrew came at this really from the business and the customer side. He had spent a lot of time on truck yards with his prior company, AT Dynamics, and he had seen the problem. And then he, was hearing all the buzz about autonomous driving and realized that there might be a solution there. And one of the things that personally I really like about Outrider is that our origin story is understanding the customer and the problem and then developing the solution, rather than starting off with a technology and trying to figure out, well, hey, what's the problem that this technology will solve? And I think it really shapes the DNA of the company and this like holistic focus that we take on a solution for customers beyond just the autonomous vehicle. But as for the reason, I don't know. I think I attribute it to a stroke of innovative genius. So
It's smart. Outrider single-handedly built a market. You have competitors now. From individuals I speak to, they say privately that you're ahead. I haven't seen your tech, not going to validate it, but from your partners and investors say that you're ahead. So I'll take their word for it. What's in the Outrider tech stack? Is it a complete autonomous driving stack? You have stuff running on the edge. What does your stack look like?
Sure. Yeah. You could say that it's a complete autonomous driving stack. I think that'd be a good short form. We have an AV kit that transforms the electric yard truck into an AV, into an autonomous capable vehicle. That's a set of sensors, radar, LiDAR, cameras, a few others, a very robust compute stack, communications equipment to give us both communications to the cloud as well as to some of the local site infrastructure. On top of that, we have our autonomous driving software. Some of that is on the truck, on the edge. Some of it is in the cloud. In brief, all of the real-time dynamic decision-making that's necessary for negotiating the mixed yard environment that we operate in, all of that runs on the truck. Some of the less time-sensitive elements we run in the cloud. But, maybe a side note on edge computing, it's one thing to talk about edge compute when it's in a building with a wired connection. It's a very different thing when you're talking about an autonomous mobile vehicle. So you really have to think about how much data you're transmitting, transmission speeds, and the suitability of what can be on the vehicle versus what can be up in the cloud. So it's a little bit of different calculus when it comes to these mobile robots. But certainly for anything that's about navigating the immediate surrounding environment, that lives on the truck. And then in addition to the autonomous driving software, there's sort of this orchestration layer, connects to customer systems to receive move requests and send back status of those requests, and then plans out and optimizes moves across the system or across the fleet of trucks that are deployed at a given site. In addition to that, there's a radio communications device that we install at every dock door that allows our trucks to essentially coordinate with the site staff to make sure that we're only bringing trailers to or from a dock door when it's safe to do so. That's the only piece of infrastructure that we install. The system is really designed to be infrastructure light, going back to that idea of being very easy to implement and integrate into systems. And so we install those boxes, and then everything else is on the truck or in our cloud.
Is the stack that you're deploying on the Outrider vehicles and yards, is that to automotive grade today, or will you eventually get to automotive grade? What does that look like?
The development and just the rapid pace of innovation that's supporting the autonomous driving industry has benefited us as well. And so many of our components are from automotive suppliers. Then, with respect to safety integrity levels, this is a space, it's on private property. So there's not a specific set of standards that apply to operating these vehicles. But we've taken a very deliberate and methodical approach to planning out and envisioning a safety system that will ensure that this vehicle operates safely in this environment. And so that leads to some components having high ASIL ratings, other components where that's not necessary.
As the Outrider system evolves, how will the stack change? I'm assuming now you're running an NVIDIA GPU. Perhaps we eventually move to Qualcomm, or how do you see the stack evolving as the technology evolves?
Yeah. Well, I definitely can't give away all the roadmap. In terms of how the stack's going to evolve, I'd point out a couple areas. So one, the industry is evolving rapidly in terms of the sensors and the compute that's available, and we will periodically update our AV kit to take advantage of either higher performance components or lower cost components. And so that'll be a natural evolution. I think we'll also continue to evolve, particularly on the autonomous driving software, the capabilities of the system. And so, going back to that idea of doing a base load of the work, doing it really well, there are then incremental opportunities to keep expanding that capacity and keep offering more value to our customers. The other area for evolution is really around that productivity that you asked about before, getting to that human level efficiency in terms of throughput, and then continuing to speed things up and find opportunities to increase throughput. So I'd say those three prongs are areas where we expect to continue developing going into the future.
Did you have to harden any of the components for the environment that you're operating in? Some of the environments, you get bumped. Oh, LiDAR broke. Do you have to build in casings and housements for the tech that is on the Outrider vehicles?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it's a harsh environment. The yards can be potholed and bumpy, so there's a lot of vibration through the vehicle that gets transmitted into our AV kit. It can also be exposed to temperature extremes and weather. Again, most of our components being automotive grade, generally that's been baked in to the components that we're sourcing. But there are some cases where we have to think about shielding the components from weather or from heat to make sure that they're able to function properly as well as live out their intended lifetime. And that has been a lot of the testing and discovering over the last years of understanding where the breaking points are and then designing to resolve that.
What weather environments can you operate in today?
Yeah. So our system's designed to operate in a range of climate conditions, but then like many autonomous driving companies, we are starting in fairer weather climates, so lower latitudes. There are a lot of distribution facilities spread across, from California through the Southwest and the Southern United States. And so from a pure prioritization point of view, we've chosen to offer our service sooner to customers who are operating in those areas, getting trucks out on their yards, really showing them the benefits that we can offer. And we will then incrementally add on more and more capabilities with respect to inclement weather, allowing us to continue scaling our systems across the country and across the world.
Do you view California as a growth market since one, you're operating on private property, and two, you're focused on zero emissions?
Yeah, we're really excited about California. From your discussion a couple years ago with Andrew Smith, sustainability has always been core to Outrider's mission. And so we're really excited about the drive to electrify in California and the adoption of electric vehicles there. Electric vehicles are a perfect companion to the Outrider autonomous system. So we're really excited to see a lot of vehicles that are essentially ready for automation with the Outrider system. And so we do see that as a significant growth market for us. Yes.
Could also be an accelerant because I'm going to say some, not the majority. There's no data to back this up. That some of these facilities already have electric vehicle charging in place that you can just piggyback on. You don't have to work with a partner to bring in the charging infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it certainly reduces the adoption hurdles if the electric infrastructure is already in place. Generally, if you look at our business case and the numbers that our customers run, the install of chargers pays itself back quickly. So it's not a major hurdle, but it speeds things up if that's already in place. One of the things that we've really seen change, not just in California, but nationwide over the last several years is if I go back to when Andrew founded the company, I think that, there was some healthy skepticism about electric vehicles. That has completely changed. And it's much more often the case now that when we deploy to a site, there is already an electric vehicle charger on the yard. There are already electric vehicles being driven manually. And so that hurdle has, in many places, already been passed.
How long can one of your vehicles operate in between charges?
Yeah. Well, I would say that, first of all, EVs are really well suited to yard operations. Most of the routes you could measure in hundreds of meters. You're never far from a charger. So there's really no range anxiety, right? It's sort of always possible to get to a charger and charge up. One of the other things about yards is that the activity ebbs and flows. So there are busy times and there are quieter times. And so what we think a lot about is, rather than thinking about sort of running for an entire period of time, is the opportunity to do opportunistic charging. So when the yard quiets down a little bit, a few of the trucks can go back, top up, and then they go back out for a busy period. Next quiet period, trucks come back. But we've designed our vehicles to be able to run, let's say, a full operational shift without needing to pause for charging.
How about the mixed traffic environment? Can you operate in mixed traffic now?
Yeah, that's been a really exciting development for us in the last couple of years, is really adding on really the autonomous driving capabilities to perceive and then negotiate in a mixed traffic environment. So on these yards, you've got other yard trucks, you've got over the road drivers, you've got maintenance vehicles, golf carts, occasionally you have pedestrians, drivers who've gotten out of their cab. And so you need to be able to handle all of that and handle it gracefully. And so with the latest upgrade to our hardware stack, we call it the Rev4 hardware stack, as well as the launch of our latest perception capabilities, we really have the ability to fully understand the environment around us and plan our paths through that to negotiate obstacles, whether they're dynamic or static, and still make it to our destination. So that's one of the things that it's been a heavy focus of the company over the last couple of years, and something that we're really proud to have operating in the world today.
Do you have to pre-map a yard before you go deploy?
We do. We do. So prior to deployment, we make a map of the yard that allows the vehicle to localize precisely within the yard. Then the yards are evolving places, right? So particularly the movable objects, the trailers, the trucks, they move around. We handle that in real time. And then if there is a change to the yard, let's say, there's an addition to a building or there's a construction project, part of the yard is being torn up. We have the ability to modify the map of the yard, either temporarily or permanently, to reflect those changes and then continue routing through that environment.
What you're going to do is unlock efficiencies. How do you see Outrider scaling? Do you have customer A and then all of a sudden you go to 10 of their sites, you go to 15 of their sites, or do you see this a hub model perhaps, so the DFW region or the Inland Empire region, very large historical warehousing operations and spreading across that? How do you see it scaling?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're a startup, so resources are finite. It's certainly advantageous to focus geographically. There's a lot of behind the scenes support that gets easier if it's concentrated. But we also have a great set of customers who have a wide network of operations, and we're committed to supporting their operations and their plans to scale autonomy. So I think the answer is it'll be a little bit of both. Where it's possible to concentrate, that drives efficiency for us. But we also want to make sure that we're driving value for the customers where they need it. And that will help drive our expansion plans as well. I think, there's this great opportunity of when we've integrated with a customer with their IT systems, then it becomes incrementally that much easier to add on another location for them. When we've deployed a single vehicle for a customer at one of their sites, then it becomes that much easier for us to deploy more vehicles at that site. And so I think there's a really nice scaling story where the more we do, the easier it gets with customers and the faster we can do it, which is really exciting.
Does it also get more cost effective when you stay with that same customer going to multiple sites of theirs?
Absolutely. I mean, I think on both sides of the equation, it's more cost effective. Yeah.
And that gets the attention of CFOs. In the annual CFO survey conducted by Duke University and the Federal Reserve Banks of Richmond and Atlanta, over 51% of CFOs surveyed said over the last 12 months their companies have implemented automation. This is the first time ever it got over 50%. Do you view this as a market catalyst for what Outrider's building?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of money going into automation right now. It's being driven by the reasons we discussed before, right? Driving efficiencies, driving safety, driving resiliency. And that's a tailwind that certainly supports Outrider. As I mentioned earlier, when we talk to customers, it's really taken almost for granted that these yards will be automated. On the flip side, I was recently at the Manifest conference, and there was a lot of conversation about the adoption of new technologies into the supply chain, into operations. And I think one of the emerging takeaways from the last couple of years is automation continues to offer incredible opportunities. And this may not be earth shattering, but the implementation can be really hard. And so I think, what we're going to see is that that pace of investment will continue, but people are more, I think, eyes wide open about some of the implementation challenges that they've experienced in the last couple of years and really trying to think about how they mitigate that. One of the other challenges that people have brought up is the workforce ready to be working alongside automation? That can sometimes be a bottleneck. And both of those things come back to how we think about designing our system. And again, I'm going to use that holistic word, right? Like thinking holistically about a solution that plugs into customer operations, requires very little behavior change, has a short implementation timeline, and can really get up and running without significant hurdles. That's something that we think a lot about in addition to building the autonomous, vehicle that's the heart of the system.
Looking to solve challenges, is that where the Trailer Connect product was developed from? So wait a second, there's a problem that we need to solve, so we're just going to build a product to solve it. Is that where that came from?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talked a little bit about the founding idea of Outrider. Then when you get into it, start unpacking things, you always find things that are particularly challenging. And Trailer Connect was one of those, right? So there's 6 million trailers. There's a number of different types they're called glad hands. That's on the trailer side, the receiver on the connection. So multiple types of glad hands. They can be in all different types of configurations with all different kinds of stuff around them. And today, every time someone moves a trailer, they get out, they make that connection. When they drop off the trailer, they disconnect it. And so if you're going to automate trailer moves, you have to automate connecting and disconnecting because it just doesn't make business sense to have that part being done by a human, but the driving done autonomously. And so, the team has spent a lot of time and effort first really understanding the problem space, I think we're probably the world's leading experts on the diversity of glad hand configurations on trailer faces, really understanding that problem and then developing an autonomous solution to make those connections. So, we use a robotic arm perception system and we're able to connect to those glad hands using an end effector that's stowed on the tractor. And we make a native connection, meaning there's no adapter or modification required on the trailer side. Whatever the trailer throws at us, that's what we connect to. And that is one of the really major breakthroughs in our system and one of the problems that we had to solve to be able to automate this end to end.
From a number standpoint, what efficiencies did the glad hands unlock? Was it saving 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 10 minutes? There's efficiencies there. How much time has that saved your customers when you developed your glad hand system?
Yeah, I would say that even more so than efficiency, automating that glad hand connection is really a safety consideration. I talked about getting humans out of the loop. Making those connections is one of the areas where humans are operating a process. They're getting out of the cab, they're stepping back. That area behind the truck can be cluttered. There are potential trip hazards. And there are injuries where drivers fall off the truck when they're making those connections. And so by automating that, taking the human out of the loop, you make it safer. And I think that's actually what I've heard a lot from customers that they're really excited about. From an efficiency point of view, we sort of think about Trailer Connect as one part of our end-to-end system for automating the trailer movement. That really gets back to that topic of first moving trailers with a throughput similar to a human and then going beyond that.
What is the most efficient way to operate Outriders in the yard?
I would say the most efficient way to operate it is first of all to have the API connection between the customer's yard management system and our system, and then for customers the experience is really they request a move, and some minutes later they get the confirmation that the move has been completed. I think the other efficiency driver in terms of adopting the system is the more visibility that the Outrider system has into the full set of potential moves on the yard, the more we're able to optimize and plan out which trucks are going to do which moves and which routes they're going to follow. And so again, it's that sort of making that connection and sharing the data across systems is really what unlocks efficiency here.
When do we get to a point where majority of the supply chain is fully automated?
Well, the supply chain, it's such a it's a huge part of the economy and a lot of links in it. I think full automation, we have to see a lot of improvement in artificial intelligence, right? To really be standing in fully for what humans are capable of doing. I think another big area, we've already talked about it, but it's like linking up those different pockets of data so you can optimize across and automate the handoffs in addition to automating each of the individual pieces. And so I'm maybe not going to take the bet on when it's fully automated, but I do think you brought it up before. We're just going to continue seeing this march of automating niches in the supply chain, like different pieces of it, areas like the yard that's never been automated, automating that, as well as continued progress on stitching together those niches into fully autonomous flows.
Does AI become the plumbing that enables the supply chain to become automated?
I think it's an essential ingredient, personally. I think there's still a lot of human decision making, even some human tasks that still only humans can do. And so advancements in AI are necessary to be able to take over those tasks and make that automation.
What happens when a majority of the supply chain is fully automated, in your opinion?
I think it goes back to the benefits we were talking about before, right? Increases in efficiency, net, that's good for the global economy. A more efficient economy is good. Improvements in safety. And then again, that resiliency piece, right? Like keeping things running, even if half of the workforce is out due to a pandemic, we're still able to move essential goods around the globe. So I think it's really the coming to fruition and seeing those benefits.
Robots do not get a cold. They don't get sleepy. They don't get too tired. They don't get distracted. They have jobs to do, and they do their jobs safely. Ira, this has been fascinating. I'm really proud of the way that Outriders evolved since January was on 2 years ago. Can't wait to see the success of where you are 2 years from now. As we look to wrap up this insightful conversation for today, what would you like our listeners and viewers to take away with them?
Yeah, I think the headline continues to be a really exciting time for the supply chain. I've been talking about this trend of automation. I think that just continues. I think, as I mentioned, continues with a little smarter in terms of some of the challenges that come with automation. But there are really fundamental needs here around driving efficiencies, driving safety, driving continuity of operations. Outrider came at this from the problem space. We're really excited to be contributing towards this automation trend. And I would say keep an eye on Outrider because the next couple of years are going to be really big ones for us.
As the supply chain becomes automated, efficiencies increase, safety increases. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is Outrider. Ira, thank you so much for coming on the road to autonomy today.
Thank you, Grayson. Really appreciate the time.
If you've enjoyed listening, please kindly rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Want to get in touch? Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Road to Autonomy, or email podcast@roadtoautonomy.com. The Road to Autonomy podcast is produced by the Road to Autonomy LLC. The views and opinions expressed on the Road to Autonomy podcast do not necessarily reflect those views of the Road to Autonomy, its subsidiaries, its shareholders, directors, investors, or partners. The content discussed on this podcast is for informational purposes only. It should not be taken as legal, investment, tax, or business advice. Nothing is a recommendation that you purchase, sell, or hold any security or other investment, or that you pursue any investment style or strategy. The content of this podcast is presented on an as-is basis with no warranties, express or implied, of any kind. Financial mentions about companies in the Road to Autonomy Index and discussions about the Road to Autonomy Indexes are for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon when making any investment decision. Furthermore, an inclusion of security within the Road to Autonomy Index is not a recommendation by the Road to Autonomy Indices LLC to buy, sell, or hold that such security, nor is it considered to be investment advice.